November 1812. The icy banks of the Berezina River. The temperature has plunged to 30 degrees below zero. A blinding blizzard sweeps across the Russian frontier. Trudging through the snow is the French Grande Armée, a freezing, starving, and ragged shadow of the greatest military machine Europe has ever seen. They are surrounded by 3 Russian armies closing in for the kill. Their uniforms are in tatters, their boots replaced by bloody rags, and thousands are dropping dead from sheer exposure. By all conventional military logic, this army should disintegrate. They should surrender, scatter, or turn on their commanders. But they do not. When the order is given to clear a path, freezing engineers willingly strip naked to wade into the ice-choked river, building pontoon bridges they know will cost them their lives. When the Russian cannons open fire, half-dead infantrymen form square, lock their bayonets, and hold their ground. It is a display of endurance that defies reason. The men of the Grande Armée fight with a fanatical, almost supernatural devotion, enduring horrors that would break any modern force. But this resilience is not an accident. It is the result of a meticulously crafted psychological framework. To understand why Napoleon's soldiers never gave up, we must look beyond the musket and the cannon. We must look into the minds of the men who marched for the emperor. At the dawn of the 19th century, the armies of Europe's great powers are rigid, aristocratic institutions. In Prussia, Austria, and Russia, soldiers are conscripted serfs, driven forward by the lash and the terrifying brutality of their own officers. They fight because they fear their commanders more than the enemy. The French army is entirely different. Born from the fires of the French Revolution, it is an army of citizens. And Napoleon Bonaparte, a master of human psychology, understands that free men cannot be driven by fear alone. They must be driven by belief. First, Napoleon cultivates a fierce, almost religious devotion to the concept of the regiment. In the Grande Armée, the regiment is not merely an administrative unit. It is a soldier's family, his home, and his identity. Each regiment carries an eagle, a bronze standard presented personally by the emperor. The eagle is not just a flag. It is the soul of the regiment. To lose the eagle in battle is the ultimate, unforgivable disgrace. To defend it is the highest honor. Men will willingly throw themselves into a barrage of grape shot to catch a falling eagle before it touches the mud. This intense esprit de corps creates an impenetrable psychological shield. A soldier might be terrified of death, but he is far more terrified of disgracing his brothers in arms. Second, Napoleon weaponizes hope through radical meritocracy. In the armies of his enemies, a commoner can never rise above the rank of a non-commissioned officer. Promotions are bought by aristocrats. But in Napoleon's army, the old rules have been burned to the ground. The emperor famously declares that every French soldier carries in his cartridge box the baton of a Marshal of France. It is not just rhetoric. It is reality. Marshal Ney, the bravest of the brave, is the son of a barrel cooper. Marshal Murat, the flamboyant king of Naples, is the son of an innkeeper. Marshal Lannes is a farmer's boy. When a teenage conscript marches into the freezing rain, he looks at the men commanding tens of thousands of troops and knows they came from the exact same dirt. This creates a powerful psychological drive. Every battle is an opportunity. Every charge is a chance for glory, titles, and unimaginable wealth. They do not fight for a distant, unapproachable king. They fight for their own destiny. But ambition and brotherhood alone cannot sustain an army through the butcher's yard of 19th century warfare. The ultimate psychological anchor of the Grande Armée is Napoleon himself. Napoleon possesses a magnetic, almost hypnotic charisma. He does not lead from a distant palace. He sleeps in the mud with his men, eats their rations, and warms his hands by their campfires. He masters the art of the psychological gesture. Before a battle, the emperor will ride through the ranks, his legendary memory allowing him to recognize the faces of veterans. He will stop, pull a grisly old sergeant by the ear, a famous sign of his affection, and ask about the man's hometown, recalling the specific battle where the soldier earned his scar. To a peasant from rural France, this is intoxicating. The most powerful man in the world knows his name. The psychological effect is devastating to France's enemies. When Napoleon arrives on a battlefield, the morale of his men surges so violently that the Duke of Wellington later remarks, "His presence on the field made the difference of 40,000 men." They call him Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal. It is a term of profound endearment. They believe he is one of them. They believe he is invincible. And because they believe he cannot lose, they fight as if victory is already preordained. Back on the battlefields of Europe, the psychological conditioning of the French soldier faces its ultimate tests. The concept of la glory is drummed into the French psyche. It is a romantic, intoxicating ideal. To die for the emperor on a foreign field is a beautiful, heroic fate. The state honors its wounded. The Légion d'honneur is established to reward bravery, regardless of social rank. A soldier wearing the small red ribbon of the Legion is treated like a god in the cafes of Paris. This culture of honor overrides the basic human instinct for self-preservation. When columns of French infantry are ordered to march directly into the teeth of Russian or Austrian cannons, they do not flinch. They dress their lines, shoulder their muskets, and march forward to the beat of the drums, shouting "Vive l'Empereur!" But what happens when the glory fades? What happens when the myth of invincibility is shattered? By 1813, the Grande Armée has been bled white by the disaster in Russia and the grinding war in Spain. The veterans, the men who truly believed in the aura of Napoleon, are mostly dead. The ranks are filled with Marie-Louise young, untrained boys, some just 16 years old, drafted prematurely to replace the fallen. Yet, the psychological machinery holds. At the Battle of Lutzen, these exhausted, starving teenagers fight with a ferocity that stuns the Allied armies. They have inherited the culture of the regiment. They are terrified of letting down the few surviving veterans who stand beside them. Even in defeat, the psychological grip of the emperor remains unbroken. This fanaticism culminates in the Imperial Guard. The Guard is the elite reserve, the shock troops of the empire. They receive better pay, better rations, and better uniforms. But the true source of their power is psychological. They are the immortals. They have never been defeated. The rest of the army views them as physical manifestations of victory. When the tall bearskin caps of the old guard move forward, a ripple of absolute certainty passes through the French lines. And it is here, at Waterloo in June 1815, that the psychology of Napoleon's army meets its tragic, inevitable end. With the battle lost and the French lines collapsing, the old guard forms squares amidst the chaos. They are surrounded by British and Prussian artillery, being torn apart by point-blank fire. They are offered the chance to surrender. The legend states that General Cambrin, commanding the square, replies with a defiant expletive, or the immortal words, "The guard dies, it does not surrender." They are annihilated. But their final stand is the ultimate proof of Napoleon's psychological mastery. These men are not fighting for a patch of muddy ground in Belgium. They are fighting for an idea. They are fighting for the immortality of their own legend. The Napoleonic Empire collapses, and the emperor is sent to die in exile on the barren rock of St. Helena. But the psychological blueprint he created endures. He proved that an army bound by brotherhood, driven by merit, and united by a shared, fanatical belief can transcend the limits of human endurance. They were mortal men, cold, hungry, and terrified. But driven by the sheer force of collective belief, they marched across the world and into history.